Hello everyone, and today I feel like talking about some lore, because I've been kind of looking at some greenskins to build up, and I've been theming an army around a potential Forest Goblin force. You can obviously not do a Forest Goblin army without having a lot of spiders, which made me think about the Feaster from Beyond. A minor deity at that, but one that people seem to forget about a lot. You see, the greenskins normally follow Gork and Mork. That is like the big thing for greenskins throughout most of the settings of Warhammer. But some minor deities do exist, and one being the Feaster from Beyond, also known as the Spider or the Spider God. So yeah, let's talk about a little bit of fun lore today, and maybe give me that inspiration to finally crack open those box of Spider Riders. So unlike most deities in Warhammer Fantasy, or in fact Warhammer in general, the Feaster from Beyond is found in a very centralized point of the world, where I do think the largest majority of spider worshippers can be found within the Drawald forest, and this is where really the discovery of the spider god came from. The Drawald, as we are aware, is incredibly dangerous. There's beastmen, chaos cults, and of course giant spiders. Those spiders have been there since, well, millennia at that point, being a massive danger to any humans that walk by. But then again, if you're willingly going through the Drawald, you're not risking death from just the spiders, but pretty much just in general. Now yes, forest goblins and spider worshipping cults can be found throughout the Warhammer Fantasy world. It's not just within the Drawald, but the educated guess is that it started in the Drawald and then kind of spread throughout the world afterward. So how did the greenskins manage to find this spider god? What happened was a bunch of greenskin tribes, filled with normal and night goblins too, invaded the Empire as is custom, even before the Empire was fully formed. As you can expect, most of those greenskin forces were defeated fully, and yeah, the greenskins would scatter. Some would go down to the Badlands once again, or into the mountains. Others were pushed straight into the Drawald. Now again, the Drawald being as it is, would have killed off most of the greenskins pushing in there. I imagine most of the orcs that would have been pushed into the Drawald would have been slaughtered outright, as, well, they're very loud and they can't sneak around quite easily. Whereas the goblins, smaller as they are and more cunning, were able to maybe survive a lot better. Many of the goblins found themselves in the areas known as the Valley of Many Eyes. It's well within the Drawald forest, which links up to something known as the Black Pit. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the goblins managed to solidify themselves within the Drawald, and as you know, greenskins reproduce by method of spores, so once they were there, it's very hard to get rid of them, especially with a forest as dense as the Drawald. And this is more or less when forest goblins came to be. The standard normal goblins started to change to their environment. We know this a lot, by the way, because goblins can evolve, same thing as other greenskins. It's just very, very rare, but this is why we have, say, for example, fire kobolds or ice goblins and the rest. Naturally, this isn't an evolution, it's more of a culture shift, but it's not like the greenskins are incapable of changing their culture around. This is where the lore does conflict a little bit, as there's mention of the forest goblins, or now forest goblins, starting to make certain agreements with the spiders of the region. Goblins always seek certain mounts or certain monsters to kind of tame, and there's a lot of spiders around there. With the spiders ending up as mounts, as we've seen, very popular units. They were also farmed for food, and also their armor, you know, the chitin, was used for weapons, armor, also as trade goods. There is mention in one of the army books that certain spiders are revered as gods, but it could be just like minor demi-deities. There was still no mention of a specific spider god known as, for example, the Feaster from Beyond. There is talk, however, of the goblin shamans of these tribes having the hallucinogenic venom of the purple skullback spiders, and this is what potentially gave the birth to the Feaster from Beyond. As there is talk of the shamans having weird dreams, being able to peer into the great webbed void, which may or may not be the Great Green in some way, shape or form, but it is said that through this venom the shamans were able to see eight-legged shadow demons, and reporting it to all the other goblins in the vicinity. So this is where belief, and greenskin belief more specifically, could have easily just birthed a god out of nothing. As you are aware, the Greenskins believe in a multitude of different things, and if they believe hard enough, it works. This is why, for example, Savage Orcs don't feel the need to wear armor, because their belief in their paint makes them durable. Their belief that a simple stick is stronger than even Gromril actually makes it happen. If enough of these goblins believe that these spiders exist, these spider demons, then, yeah, it just happens. This is literally how gods are birthed in Warhammer, how Sigmar became a deity in his own right. In short, yes, very likely just a bunch of high goblins created a brand new god. And this is where the spider cult comes in. The tribes within the Drawald basically started something really unseen with Greenskins in general. Gork and Mork were still worshipped, but a lot of Forest Goblins started to turn their attention towards the Spider God, whether loads of effigies were built up, shrines were put on the backs of Arachnarok spiders, and the Spider God became a chief deity of sorts to these specific goblin tribes, which is really interesting because Gork and Mork did really nothing about it. Gods themselves can become active when stuff like this is threatened, but it seems that maybe it all played to the same devices. Some orcs kind of figured that maybe the Spider God is a pet for either Gork or Mork or both, so as long as it wasn't taking the attention away from the chief gods, I guess the orcs allowed it to continue. Mind you, the orcs that didn't want this to happen would send their forces into the Drawald and then, be feasted upon by the spiders. The shamans, just as they would have with Gork and Mork, commune with the Spider God, where it's hypothesized that the venom once again will allow them to speak directly to the spiders, which will then have their prayers answered and some powers bestowed to them. We do know of special magical items too, which can peer into the void and can also heal, but that could either be goblin belief, greenskin belief in general, or the fact that there is something more magical to it, which does make sense when you look towards the Black Pit. The Black Pit is seen as the de facto capital for the Forest Goblins and has something very strange about it. It never really gets explained too much, but when Mansleeb and Morsleeb are in proper alignment, Arachnarok spiders tend to become a lot more active. You see, there's always Arachnarok spiders around the Drawald, but apparently Arachnarok spiders from forests around the world will kind of start to make their way there. Something is drawing them in, which could be the said spider demon that these shamans are rambling about. Creatures that large have to be drawn in for a specific reason. It could have been that the spider god was going to make itself properly known at some point. Obviously that's not the case because of the end times, but could kind of go into the old world. Whatever the case, I always find it really interesting that there is another god. Of course, there is another god in a sense, the Bad Moon. We might talk about that in the future because it's a really weird thing, right? Yes, the Bad Moon technically counts as a deity, but in its own right, and then it's still found in the Realms of Chaos throughout older maps. Only in Age of Sigmar did they make it like a full-on deity, I think. However, the Spider God always had some representation, and it's just never really been pushed out that much. Like, for example, again, the spider banner, it says that there's eyes peering out through it. The catch web spider shrines that you can build on the Arachnarok spiders, yeah, they help your spellcasters, so clearly there's some power that channels through them. And of course, there's spells like the Gift of the Spider God, which gave poison attacks to nearby allies. But I've always been kind of curious about the Spider God. There's something, like, there's so many mentions in so many different books. It's not just like army books. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplayers actually helped out quite a lot to kind of bring them into the flesh a little bit more. But it's always curious, and it's a shame that, obviously the end times, but we've never seen more about it. I think a minor pantheon for the Greenskins would always be kind of cool. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. I feel like I'm gonna, once I'm done with this like Cathayan troop that I'm building up, I think I'm gonna start painting up some Spider Riders. I like talking about lore, even if it's really obscure. And I do want to do some more lore videos as time progresses, so yeah, let me know what you might be interested in hearing about. I might do something on Triton at some point, because he's weird. See ya!